Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Procurement Summit meeting. My name is Jan, and I'll be moderating today's call. Our speaker today is Blair, Senior Manager of Global Operations Procurement for Drug Substance Contract Manufacturing at AstraZeneca, presenting Lessons in Supplier Selection. We will turn to the presentation in just a moment, but first I want to go over the web conference instructions. Everyone is currently in mute so that the background noise does not become distracting for the other participants. To view today's presentation as the screens change live, you may go to the link that was sent to you in your reminder email. Once there, you can click anywhere on the page, and you'll get a pop-up that allows you to make a comment. If you have a question during the presentation, enter it there as a comment, and we'll make sure all of them are answered. For the newer participants in the group, it might be useful to review some of the main benefits you can take advantage of as a member at no additional charge. First, the live monthly web conference meetings, which you've already dialed into today. I hope you find these useful, and we have an excellent lineup, which you can see by going to our website schedule page. Second, we do record all of these, so if you're traveling or stuck in another meeting, simply log in at your leisure, and the full archives of past meetings are available to you with a number of interesting topics. Third, get to know the other members. By logging in, you can see all of their profiles, and we're glad to make any introductions if wished. Fourth, if you're wrestling with any key decisions or issues, we strongly encourage you to reach out to the other members. Also, our site makes it very easy to post questions. The seniority and experience of your fellow members makes this the best possible forum to get advice from others who probably dealt with the same issues and can give you sound advice on what worked and what did not. Fifth, we really encourage site visits. If you've not visited others' offices to have a great discussion on best practices and see their facilities, please do so. You can log in to see the other members' companies and cities, so feel free to reach out, or as mentioned, we're happy to make introductions. Sixth, we also generate executive summaries of meetings, including the key takeaways and learning nuggets, so that you can reference them and put them right into action. Seventh, our members are very busy, so we started a service where we pick out the top 6 most interesting articles among thousands at hundreds of sites to keep you abreast and ensure you don't miss the key ones. Lastly is our Book of the Month summary that you can either read or listen to as you commute. Each month, we'll be selecting the most interesting book, then summarizing the ideas, so within minutes you can absorb the key takeaways. There are many other benefits, of course, but I wanted to highlight some and ask you to keep a lookout in your inbox for a number of these each month. That takes care of the housekeeping items. Give me just a moment to pull up the speaker's presentation and introduce him. Okay, all set. Now, before I turn the call over, I'd like to tell you a little bit about our speaker today. Blair began his career at Pfizer while he earned a master's from the University of Connecticut. He has been part of the AstraZeneca Operations Procurement Organization supporting external manufacturing since 2011. Thank you so much for being with us today. Just say next when you want the slides to advance, and the floor is all yours.
Okay, thanks, Jan. Thanks to the organizers for the invitation to be here today. Hello, everyone. I'm Kyle. Listen, I'd like to share a case study of supplier selection process that we used last year to support one of our oncology programs here at AstraZeneca. Before we get to that, I'd like to give a brief overview of AstraZeneca, just a couple snapshot key items about us. And then, since we're all impacted by cancer in one way or another, I'd like to give a high-level description of this particular cancer drug, which will provide some context as to why it was not so easy to find the right manufacturing partner for this program. Next. Okay, so here's some of the key facts about AstraZeneca. We're as of the end of 2018, total revenue is about $22 billion. We invest each year about $6 billion in research and development. Our development pipeline now has almost 150 projects. And that pipeline, of course, creates the new products that fuel the growth of our business. The last 3 years have seen a wave of approvals of new drugs for us, and also approvals of new indications for existing drugs. And this share price. I'll ask you to Google us after the talk and see how we're doing, but I think you'll be pleased. Next slide. Okay, we're driven by science. We challenge ourselves to keep our patients at the center of everything we do. And then finally, our strategy is to focus on those therapeutic areas where we feel we can best compete. And that seems sort of intuitive, but, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, we were so spread out across, a million therapeutic areas, and we didn't really have a good, clear focus on where we could win. And got a new CEO in 2013, and he helped us to bring that focus. And I think it's paid off for us. Next slide. Here are our strategic priorities at AstraZeneca. The first two really are the same as on the previous slide. What's new on this slide compared to the last one is that last bullet about being a great place to work. Now, to be honest, when our leadership rolled out this priority, I think we were all pretty skeptical. It sounded very warm and fuzzy, but we weren't sure what it was going to mean. But I have to admit that they really are trying to provide meaningful venues for getting our feedback on what's working and what's not. And it covers everything. It covers IT support to sustainability to the number of meetings we have. And it's not just feedback by way of automated surveys, of which I think we all get too many of those. This initiative includes focus groups and leadership town halls. And it really feels like they're listening to what we have to say. Next slide. Okay, so for the case study itself, we'll take a peek at this particular type of cancer drug. Then we'll look at how we chose the right partner to carry out this specialized manufacturing. And then finally, how we create the right partnership with that new partner. Next slide. By way of background, in 2018, there were 18 million new cases of cancer reported worldwide. On average, that's about 1 every 2 seconds. So over the next 30 minutes together, that'll be about 1,000 new cases. Next slide. Of those 18 million new cases, lung cancer and breast cancer have the terrible distinction of leading the pack with about 2 million new cases each per year. The other major types of cancer shown on this graph each had over 500,000 new cases. Just pause a minute and let you take that in because it's pretty frightening. Okay, on the next slide. So, with all that cancer out there, what are drug companies doing about it? Well, one approach is to take a page out of our immune system. And the power of our immune system is that it can recognize foreign invaders, foreign cells that should not be there. And it can create antibodies to isolate and neutralize those foreign cells. So recently, over the past, let's say, 20 or 30 years, scientists have been able to figure out how to use genetic engineering to custom make some antibodies that will target certain types of cancer. Now that's pretty amazing all by itself. But the really clever part for this particular drug is that we can bind a cancer-killing agent to that new genetically engineered antibody and then turn it loose to seek and destroy only the cancer cells that are affecting the patient. Next slide. So if you know anybody, this really reiterates what was on the last slide. If you know anyone that's gone through classic chemotherapy, you know the side effects are terrible. And those classic drugs are not very selective. They don't just kill the cancer cells, they kill everything around the cancer cells, and that leads to those side effects. Well, the power of this new type of drug is that we can deliver that cancer-killing agent much more precisely. So it's only hitting the cancer cells, giving far fewer side effects and a better outcome for the patient. Next slide. Okay, so now we're getting to the actual case study of finding the right partner and how we did supplier selection to support this particular program. So finding the right partner to make one of these magical new drugs presents a number of challenges shown here. That worried face in the middle is an actual photograph of me on most days during this project. Moving from left to right, some of the challenges were uncertain material demands. Okay, so this new drug, we really did not know what the dose was going to be, so we did not know how much we were going to need at each stage of the development, each stage of development milestones. And that's tough, because one of the first things my contract manufacturer partners asked me is, well, Kyle, how much do you need and when do you need it? And it was hard to come up with hard and fast numbers to give them. But what that did teach me, and what I put in the back of my mind, is I needed to have flexibility at the end of the day because of that variability of demand that I wasn't sure about up front. I needed a partner that could have a level of flexibility, whatever that demand turned out to be. And then moving sort of clockwise around the horn there, some of the pieces of this drug require special engineering containment. It's a cancer-killing agent, half of it. And so you got to have the right engineering controls in place. The green box on top, it's pretty new technology, so there really are a limited number of partners out there that had the kind of commercial expertise that you would find for just about every other type of manufacturing. The red box, about 2 o'clock, was probably the most worrisome for me, because making one of these drugs, a lot of different elements have to come together at the right place, at the right time, at the right quality in order to create this drug. And then finally, the analytical requirements, there were some specialized analytics required to ensure we were getting what we needed. So those are some of the high-level challenges. And I guess what's one sort of valuable exercise that I went through with the technical team is, apart from any preconceived, procurement program that I would come there with for supplier selection, I asked each of the various functions to tell me, okay, what are you worried about? What could go wrong here? What's your biggest fear as we're choosing this supplier? And I got them to actually go to the trouble of writing down what their concerns were. And the reason for doing that is those concerns, pictured on this slide, they're going to help at the end of the day with our selection process. These concerns need to find their way into our selection grid so that we feel good about the result. Next slide. So addressing all those concerns is going to require finding the right partner. We go to the next slide. Now, I'm old enough to recognize these great American dance partners, Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers. Sadly, most of my millennial colleagues had no idea who these people were, so I had to find a different picture for them, which is on the next slide. There you go. That's contemporary partnership. It's not from the last century. This is from this century. So there it is. Next slide, please. Okay. So between this slide and the following slide, that's really going to be the crux of our supplier selection paradigm, and probably the most valuable and hopefully generally applicable to to you, whatever industry you're in. As we mentioned, all the challenges that we worried about in that cartoon, they need to find expression in your selection process. And for us, here are the various value buckets that we felt addressed those concerns. Okay, so starting at 12 o'clock, technical capabilities and execution, clearly important. The company needs to know, they need to know what they're doing, they need to know what the constraints are, they need to know what the exposure levels are that their people can be exposed to or not. They need to know how to handle these materials, they need to how to evaluate these materials. Are they really getting what the specification said we needed them to get? And then to the right, going around the clock, their quality, of course, trumps everything. If they don't have a good quality system that's blessed by the FDA, the discussion's over. We can't go forward. Timeline is critically important for us in our business. Being first to market is an entirely different proposition than being second to market or third to market. Overall value, of course, we have to weigh and try to come up with an apples-to-apples comparison of the price. Business operations, about 7 or 8 o'clock there. We like to look at not only their technical execution, but the structure of their company and the contingencies and the connections between various parts of their company. We like to look at, is there any part of this process or program that they'll need to outsource? And how do they manage those partners? How do they manage their own suppliers of materials or analytics or whatever other suppliers they have? And then strategic alignment, we like to evaluate what else can they do? Okay, we need a partner for this particular drug. They have to be great at that. But our overriding strategy is to find a few number of great partners that can support a number of programs within the portfolio. So we need to count that strategic alignment as part of the overall selection criteria. Now, one key dynamic here as you look at this is, and it's probably obvious, but the selection for us, it needs to be cross-functional. Okay, it cannot be as successful if me, the procurement guy, just shows up with my plan and my program and my selection grid and foist it on the team. No. We wanted each function to ask their questions their way. Okay, and then when the results came in from the various candidates in the selection process, we had those people from those functions evaluate those responses. So that, it's just important that every function that has to wear this decision and manage this decision after it's made had a voice at the table in how the decision was made. It improves their ownership of the decision. And inevitably, we're going to run into problems down the road, whoever we choose. None of these suppliers are going to be perfect. We're going to run into problems and challenges. And when we do, we need each part of our team, each functional part of our team, to be on board, to be supportive, to be all in. If they feel like they did not have a chance to influence the decision, they're less likely to be a good player when we run into trouble. So I think having a cross-functional grid helps result in a better selection. And then it also helps with getting the team on board once that selection's made and if we run into any problems down the road. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this captures really, it's just a different way of looking at the grid on the previous slide. It has a little bit more a little more granularity on the kinds of questions we thought were important that we needed answered in order for us to feel good about the decision. Now, this is a procurement call that we're on now, so I'll sort of direct your attention to the last two columns, strategic and business operations. Under the strategic heading, we like to look at the utilization of their capacity, and an important element of that is what we call supply resilience, or business continuity. We need to feel a comfort level that if one of their reactors goes down, we're not stuck and have to start over somewhere else. We wanted to see a certain level of redundancy in what they could do and in the equipment that they have, so that if one goes down, has some type of nonconformance or has some type of issue, we can quickly move to another piece of equipment within that same site under the same quality system. So, yeah. In business operations, of course, you guys are all procurement people, so we think in terms of total cost of ownership. All right, it's obvious and easy for us because we're in procurement, but for my technical colleagues, and particularly for development teams, time is so important for them. They get evaluated by whether or not they can adhere to the clinical timeline that they've been given by the leadership. So if one company can do it in February and another company can do it in March, they like the one in February, no matter what else is going on in the evaluation. And it was my job to say, well, wait a minute, we got to be full-orbed. We have to be circumspect about how we make this decision. It can't just be driven by one parameter like the timeline. And it can't be driven by just one parameter like, batch price. It's a compilation of all the key factors that makes for a good decision. Okay. Next slide, please. So the last couple slides, we talked about finding the right partner, and that's a cross-functional approach where each function asks their questions their way, and they get to evaluate those results. And you add that, we agree together on how to weigh those various value bucket elements, and we arrive at a score for which supplier we like. And then once that's done, okay, and we've chosen the supplier we like, now the challenge is creating the right partnership with that contract manufacturing partner. So the next slide. So this one, just like when we had that cartoon that showed our worries, and I was saying, those worries need to translate into your selection grid, okay? It's the same principle here. The worries that we had on that previous slide, the challenges that we were facing, that we worried about, each of those need to find expression in the actual contract that we have with the partner that we select, okay? So, for example, in the sort of the yellow-colored cloud at the top, there's a complexity of supply chain, and a lot of things have to come together at the right time, at the right place, the right quality. So that means in the contract we need to see some flexibility, so that if one of those elements does not get to their site on time, we don't get killed on the cancellation terms. We needed to build into the contract flexibility to address that particular concern that we had up front. Likewise with the others. There's an urgency of timeline. As I mentioned, getting the market first is a lot better than getting the market second. So that means that our partner in the contract, if it's the end of the world for us to be late, then it needs to be the end of the world for our partner to be late also. Okay, so there has to be some incentivization. Both parties parties have to be incentivized to meet that timeline commitment. We need to know that our partner is all in the timeline just as much as we are. And if they're not, then there has to be some real consequences with teeth to motivate everybody at the table to deliver. Uncertainty in the clinic, and then the pink block on the contract. That's just sort of a general concept that if you have more than one program, it's nice to be able to substitute. If one program falls behind, if you have another one you could put in there, and allowing for that in the contract is a good thing. And then for this particular program, some of these intermediates, the antibody and the cancer-killing agent, they're outrageously expensive to make. I mean, so when those materials are on site at our partner, they need to have a robust, in the contract, there needs to be a robust provision that obligates them to take care of those materials with the same care that they would use on any of their most valuable materials. So that's part of developing the right partnership. Taking those fears, those worries that we had at the beginning, making sure they find expression in the final contract with your partner. Then on the next slide. This one is not applicable all the time. For this particular program, the case study I'm sharing, it was applicable because we had more than one project. And so that justified the creation of a joint steering committee. If you just have one project, if it's just a one-off, you probably don't want to carry the administrative burden of setting up a joint steering committee and all that goes into that. But in this case, we had multiple programs, and so we wanted to set up a steering committee so that if we're seeing problems across projects, and we can help each other to identify, any common themes, so that it gives our partner a chance to address those themes and help more than one project rather than just each project working in isolation. Also, it's important that, and actually, even if it's just one project, it's important early on to identify escalation pathways. Yeah. So if the partner is delayed, or the material that they got doesn't meet spec, or whatever the problem is, you need to know if it's not handled within the project team, let's say weekly meeting, in a reasonable amount of time, what's going to happen next? How is it going to get escalated? Who's going to be responsible for doing that? So thinking through those levels of escalation is actually quite important to avoiding some heartbreak and disappointment down the road. Okay, I did not want to go too long, so that's all I have. I probably went too fast. I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kyle. We really enjoyed your presentation. Before I go and check the questions submitted, do we have any live questions? Again, it's *6 to unmute your line and go ahead with your question. Or you can click anywhere on this last slide and you'll see how to make a comment and leave your question there. So again, any live questions? Okay, Kyle, we've received several questions throughout the presentation. Keep in mind you may have touched on these topics, but I'm going to ask all the questions anyway in case there's something you'd like to add to or elaborate on. Okay, the first one. How are you vetting partners for their technical capabilities?
Well, we sit down with the technical subject matter experts on our end, and we have them create specific technical capabilities questions, okay, whether that's related to the size of the reactor, or their experience at various scales of doing this type of work, whether it's the analytical tools that they have, the experience with those analytical tools, their experience with an FDA audit. So, I mean, basically the answer is we ask our subject matter experts to create a spreadsheet of different capabilities questions, and that's part of our RFP process. There's not only a pricing spreadsheet, about batch pricing and one-time tech transfer costs. There's also a capabilities tab where our SMEs got to ask specifically those technical questions.
Okay, good. Thank you. The next question that came in is, did the needs of your functions ever conflict? And if so, how did you resolve those differences?
No, that's a good question. The answer is yes. I think there's built in a healthy tension between some of the business needs and strategic needs and the more technical or timeline-driven needs. Now, the way and I say it's a healthy tension, it does not always feel like a healthy tension, okay? But the way that we tried to address that and head that off was, before we get responses in, we agreed together with all the various functions on how we're going to relatively weigh those various priorities. So is the technical element worth 10% of the final score? Is it worth 20%? Is it worth 50%? We agree as a team on how to value that. How about the quality element? How about the pricing element? How about the business operations or strategic element? So how about their regulatory history? So we agreed beforehand how to weigh those various factors. Now, I mean, it's not a suicide pact, right? And it's not, we don't want to pretend that it's more granular or arithmetic than it really is. But agreeing beforehand on the relative weight of those various factors, I think, is important, and it seemed to head off any real difficult conflict afterwards.
Okay, thank you for that. The third question is, how were you able to select a single supplier to meet your needs? This project was sensitive at a number of levels. Were you comfortable without any redundancy?
That's a good question as well. It did require the various nodes that have to come together were a cause for concern for everyone, and but at the end of the day, we needed to find the best fit. And part of our evaluation was, how did they mitigate risk at each one of the unit operations, whether they were making the cancer-killing agent, whether they were connecting that to the antibody, whether they were putting it in the vials at the end, whatever the unit operations were, and several unit operations within each of those, we were asking them about their risk mitigation strategy. And then you add that all up and you get sort of a risk picture for the whole process. So it's a great question. I'm not sure we have a great or perfect answer for that, but we did try to assess, their risk mitigation efforts at each unit operation.
Okay, good, thanks. And the last question that came in is, how did you get past confidentiality issues with proprietary information?
Well, before we send them the RFP, we have to get a confidentiality disclosure agreement in place. That's step one, because the point of the question is well taken. We can't disclose anything, nor nor do they want us disclosing anything about their operations. So we put a CDA in place first thing, before we even send them the RFP.
Okay, good, thanks. And we've covered everyone's questions. Do you have any final thoughts or words of wisdom you'd like to share before we end the summit today?
No, just again, thanks for the invitation. I hope I get to meet some of you in a different venue, and thanks again.
Okay, Kyle, thanks. And on behalf of all the executives on the line, I'd like to thank you for sharing such powerful ideas and key thoughts with us today. Your involvement and dedication to our profession sets a high benchmark for others to follow. For all of the participants on today's call, thank you for your continued membership and insightful questions for today's speaker. The meeting is now officially concluded. Kyle, thank you so much again, and everybody have a good day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello, and welcome to the meeting. Please enter. Please hold while I confirm your passcode. Thank you for joining Global Meet. Would you like your guests to be able to... All guests have been muted. You will now rejoin... You are about to end this meeting. You are the only person still in the meeting.